Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Amy Fitterer, Executive Director of Dance USA.
Good morning. Welcome to the closing session of our Minneapolis conference. This has been an amazing conference, and I really owe it all to you. I've been having a lot of fun, so thank you. So we're going to try to move real quick into this closing session. I do want to make sure that I acknowledge our wonderful title sponsors who have made this conference possible: American Harlequin Corporation and the DeWitt Stern Group. So thank you so much for your support. I would also like to make sure that I acknowledge the beautiful Cole Center for Dance and the Performing Arts and Northrop for being our conference host partners. So this session came about in conversations, I'm just going to give him credit, from Paul King, traveling around the country. He's the co-founder of Whitebird, the dance presenting house in Portland, Oregon. And he was traveling around the country, as he does, watching lots of dance, and he was somewhere in Australia, and I get a very excited email from Paul. And he's, I have an idea. And those of you who know Paul can imagine this bubbling excitement of this brilliant idea. And so I start reading it, and I'm like, this makes a lot of sense. This is a really cool framework for talking about issues in our field. What Paul was experiencing while he was out at a dance festival in Australia was, as a dance presenter, he was feeling really pulled all over the place in a very exciting way, but in a very overwhelming way. He was seeing dance artists doing work that are not meant for stage, they're not meant for theaters, but they might even be on point shoes. He was seeing so many different types of work and how it was being made and where it was being performed, and he was wondering, how as a presenter am I going to deal with this? Because my job is not to make the dance fit the stages, my job is to follow the artist. And so he was feeling really pulled off of his gravity center as a dance presenter. He was also paying attention to the many, many shifting issues in our environment, which we all know about, we've been really conscious about, but sometimes we don't stop to really sit and just be aware of the fact that, yes, we are being pulled and pushed, and what we thought our gravity center was is changing, and maybe it's changing a lot faster, so we have to kind of constantly keep finding our gravity center. So Paul and I got on the phone and started talking, and I just thought, this is such a wonderful framework for talking about the full holistic 360 look at the dance environment in which we're in. So we have a wonderful moderator to guide us through our conversation this afternoon, and if it goes really well, we just might see a series of gravity pull discussions. So we also welcome your feedback and ideas. How can you see gravity pull evolve and morph, both online, in-person discussions over the coming months and years? So our moderator is Suzanne Carbonneau. Some of you know her very, very well, and some of you might not know her at all. Suzanne is a former board member of Dance USA. She is an essayist, critic, and historian whose writings have appeared in the Washington Post, the New York Times, and other publications. She founded and directed the National Endowment for the Arts Arts Journalism Institute, and she has served as a critic in residence at the American Dance Festival and the Joyce Theater. Suzanne is a scholar in residence at Jacob's Pillow Dance Festival and has also served as the resident scholar at the Bates Dance Festival. She regularly writes and lectures for the John F. Kennedy Center for the Performing Arts. Suzanne holds a PhD from NYU. She's a current professor at George Mason University, and she's currently working on a critical biography of Paul Taylor, which will be published by Farrar, Straus, and Giroux. Suzanne is a MacDowell Fellow, a Yaddo Fellow, and a recipient of the Guggenheim Fellowship. I cannot imagine a more wonderful person to moderate this conversation, so please welcome Suzanne Carbonneau.
Analysts, Aparna Ramaswamy, Zachary Wittenberg, and Renee Williams-Niles.
Before I introduce the panelists in more detail, I want to just say a few words. In the closing session, we're going back to where we began the conference, to the poem The Way It Is by William Stafford that Cecily Summers quoted in her keynote address on Thursday. I've thought about the poem now for 3 days, and it represents for me a wonderful bookend for our panel. We end where we began, but we hope the richer for our having been together for the week. The poem's very short. It goes, there's a thread you follow. It goes among things that change, but it doesn't change. People wonder about what you are pursuing. You have to explain about the thread. But it is hard for others to see. While you hold it, you can't get lost. Tragedies happen, people get hurt or die, and you suffer and get old. Nothing you can do stop time's unfolding. You don't ever let go of the thread. So we're here to talk about the thread. There are 2 points of geographic serendipity about this, for us here at the conference about this poem about William Stafford, who wrote it. First, he was born and raised in the Midwest, where we gathered this weekend. And second is that Stafford spent his adult life in Oregon. He was the poet laureate of Oregon. And I love that because the idea for this panel did come from Paul King from Whitebird. But even more important for us is that Stafford was a brave and independent person who lived his values. He was interned in a work camp during World War II. He's a conscientious objector. World War II, of course, was a popular war, so-called good war, and Stafford lived out his values in the face of the toughest social disapprobation, fighting his way against a cultural consensus. He was an artist who had a deep feeling for nature. He called the sky his home. And despite his overarching concern with the environment, he was witness to the destruction, as we all are. He saw the value, the absolute necessity of remaining optimistic. If he was to effect change, he had to believe that it was possible. He also had the example of nature itself as a guide. He saw clearly what was happening. As I said, he was a realist. But he also saw that the wilderness regenerated if given the chance. So connection not only to nature, but also to other people is the ultimate subject of all his poems. This seems to be a wonderful model for us who face such challenges in the current climate surrounding the arts, culture, and social change, the subject of so much of our conversation this week. So today we're going to take a page from Stafford and look realistically at where we are and how we can proceed with such realism, but also with optimism, as we look for ways to move forward, to see the prospect of success and progress, even with the challenges that we face. None of us have given up. It's hard, but we wouldn't be here if we had. So today we're looking for some resolutions, for some advice, for some innovative ways to look at both abiding and new problems and situations. We want to share creative approaches to finding solutions. So the panel is taking as its guiding metaphor something analogous to Stafford's thread. That is a physical metaphor that works so well for dancers. The metaphor is gravity. We all have a center about what our values are, but we're also always being pulled. Our centers of gravity are shifting. We're being pulled by funders. We've heard a lot of talk about that this week, by audiences, by technology, by culture and economic change, and even by the artists, as Amy suggested. The list seems endless. We're constantly being pulled and pushed. Paul King actually wanted to start us off by saying something.
Thanks so much, Suzanne. Good morning, everybody. It's been such a productive Dance USA conference. On Monday, I will be back along with many of you in my office with the pressure cooker of demands and deadlines. There are so many things that need my attention that at times it's hard to know which to focus on first. Having a filter to help prioritize and bring things into bite-sized pieces can really help in moving forward in constructive ways. We need to look at our centers, our core, our center of gravity. We need to find tools and support that help us keep centered and focused. But when we feel the pull away from our centers, we need to evaluate how to respond. Do we need to shift our center of gravity, even temporarily? Do we need to try to draw others to our center of gravity? Can we pull together large groups of people and amass a huge center of gravity that will have dynamic force in changing policy and raising awareness? These are the questions, among others, we'd like to explore today with your help. To bring continuity to this concept, we're hoping to use the format of Gravity Pull to address a variety of issues in many different ways, including in-person, online, and via Skype. This is the way we can stay connected and focused. So I am very grateful to Suzanne, Aparna, Zach, and Renee for bringing this panel forward and having this discussion. And your voice here is of paramount importance. Thanks for being here. Thanks, Suzanne.
So I'm going to introduce our panelists. Their full bios are on your apps on the website. But let me just say that Renee Williams-Niles is the Vice President of Programming for the Music Center in Los Angeles, one of the 3 largest performing arts centers in the United States, and she was formerly Director of Dance Presentations at the Music Center. Zachary Wittenberg has a long resume as both a dancer and a writer. He is Manager of Communications at Hubbard Street Dance Chicago. And Aparna Ramaswamy is co-artistic director, choreographer, and principal dancer of Ragamala Dance in Minneapolis, and she's a trustee of Dance USA. And they're going to start us off with this conversation today, and then we are going to get you all into it. But we did want to start out with opening some issues. We had a phone conversation last week about the issues that some of us are dealing with. How do you deal with that? How can we share our challenges and solutions? That's what we're here to do today. So, and as Paul suggested, maybe laying out the groundwork for future conversations. So issues contributed by the panelists including becoming and staying relevant, engagement, how we use all the data that is crushing us, how we deal with funders, pulling our audience along with us aesthetically, ownership, relationships with audiences, and the idea of trust. And as you saw, there was a sign up, or there was a place to put post-its of your own. And these are what people have contributed this week. Some of it, of course, had to do with money constraints. Budgets and limitations due to money, paid positions in the field, that is lack of job opportunities, working for free. There were time constraints, lack of time, the burden of emails and social media. Bad time management leads to feeling overwhelmed, someone wrote. Related topics about too many pulls, too many distractions, a noisy mind, conflicting work responsibilities, and others. Lack of capacity to gain traction, business scalability for the individual artist, overthinking and getting neurotic, somebody wrote. Closed minds, I don't know if that's us or outside. Inconsistency, isolation, that's a huge one for us. That's why we love being here this week so much. A lack of passion in life, someone wrote. Judgment based on age, I think that could go either way. When I cannot see literally and figuratively. And one lovely person left us a positive note, which was unexpected opportunity. So those are just some of the issues that people have already brought up. I'm sure we'll hear some more. And we're looking also for your own solutions to those questions. But right now, we're going to go to the panel. We're going to start with Renee, and she can tell us about what her center is, because we're looking here for both the center. What keeps us center? What pulls us off? How do we get back to that center? Renee?
There's so much that pulls me away from center. This feels a little bit like group therapy, actually, which we probably could all use. I would say, for me, there's so much that resonate, particularly that so many of you wrote on the Post-its. In particular, for me, it's engagement, and this notion of engagement, particularly the Music Center has been involved in participatory art making, or we refer to it as DIY programs for the last 11 years. We've just recently have said that we are making an effort to make engagement at the core of the institution. This is a 50-year-old institution with about 700 full-time employees, somewhere around there. So figuring out how engagement on every single level, and there are times where I just feel that so much of this notion is taking me away from the focus on what it is that we're trying to do. For me, secondarily, would probably be the data, all of this research. I love statistics. I like tearing them apart, and especially the methodology. But I don't know about some of you, but what I'm finding is, as more and more of us are connected, my donors, board members, it's no longer the case where just within our field that we are receiving the constant updates of data. But now I'm getting these things from my donors saying, did you hear about this? And some of them want to be so reactive, especially to this newfound information. So it's a necessity that for myself and now for the entire programming team, that actually we use our staff meeting not just to talk about the day-to-day, but we use the staff meetings to ensure that as a team, we are continuing to define and clarify what our center is for programming focus.
Great. Okay, Doug?
Thank you. So just right off the bat, I'll say that I'm speaking today from my perspective as communications manager for the company, which is an interesting seat to have. It's not directorial, and I'm not sort of laying out years in advance what the programming is and where the organization is going. But my central responsibility is to manage the relationship between our programming and with language as it goes out to the public, and all of the public-facing text around Hubbard Street's work tends to go through my desk or is written by me from scratch. What I sometimes think in my head, instead of the fact that I'm manager of communication, is that I'm the manager of expectation. And in thinking about the topic of the panel today and just what gravity pull means in my day-to-day reality there, is that I think that one of the strongest gravitational pulls away from our center organizationally comes when there is not routine maintenance done on this language, and when we're not being specific and diligent about how we're describing what we do. As just a little bit of history, I first came to Chicago and to Hubbard Street in 2002 as a company member. I danced for the company for 2 seasons, and then I left for 7 years in 2004. When I came back about 2 years ago, in my current role, the organization had changed tremendously. We had rolled out 2 entirely new departments that didn't exist when I was a dancer in the company. We had built out programming for youth and families on site at our studios, a building that we added 3 studios to in the intervening years, that are now serving close to 1,000 families per session. We added a department of adaptive dance programs for children on the autism spectrum, neurotypical kids with physical disabilities, and people with Parkinson's. There were all of these things that Hubbard Street didn't used to do that were now central, and each of those programs grew up with its own mission statement and was, as we hear a lot at conferences like this, the organization became siloed. What happened in 2007, sort of at the midpoint of my absence from the company, was that there was a strategic plan that broke apart this siloed structure, internally reorganized the company, and unified all of these disparate programs under a single mission statement, which then became the lens through which decisions were made. And what that really helps is that, maybe a generation ago, the word dance at Hubbard Street meant a very specific thing. It was wonderful. This came up a couple days ago in a conversation between Dr. Chatterjee and Michelle Steinwald, just talking about how their mentorship relationship worked during an artistic development process. And Michelle was talking about, we had to develop a lexicon for what Ananya was doing choreographically. And something that is in Hubbard Street's DNA is that we're always doing different things, and we're always creating new models of performance. Our season in the fall begins with a collaboration with the Second City, which is an organization devoted to improv and sketch comedy. A far cry from when we were predominantly performing the works of Twyla Tharp. So dance means different things. Dance means one thing in one room, and in the adjacent studio, dance means something completely different. And it's my job to do the daily maintenance and the diligence of being very specific about what we're doing within each different department and within each program so that the expectations are laid out. Because now more than ever before, people are communicating through language. The social media piece is a huge, huge and central part of this puzzle, and one that I'm sort of most engaged with on a day-to-day basis, because people are going to read anywhere from a little to a lot about you before they sort of come into your building, come into your space, and experience the live work. So use those words that you have, use the language on their website, use the language in the press releases, and if something's fallen out of date, fix it and replace it. And I'm constantly tweaking language and just making little changes here and there, and that word it just doesn't feel right anymore. And I know that 6 months ago when we launched this is what it was called, but it's just not that anymore. And I'm constantly walking around the building sort of watching and looking and talking to people about what is it that we're doing, because it's my job to describe it accurately, and that's a great first step to avoid being yanked. Because a gravity pull doesn't happen as a big yank; you drift off. I think, and more so that the longer an organization exists and the larger it becomes, it's that creep. And so when you write the creep a little bit each day and fix the alignment, it's a lot easier to stay on track.
Great. Aparna?
So in our conversation that we had last week, I was talking about what pulls me away from the actual art and the aesthetic is the business of art, making sure that you're really keeping in touch with changing funding guidelines or this idea of communicating accurately, especially because I work within a culturally specific forum with a very specific contemporary aesthetic, and I want to make sure that people understand the work and where we're coming from. And I don't think, though, that this is just a problem that we have with our form. I think that it's important for all of us as art makers to talk about the work and communicate constantly, and that is time-consuming. It really is, and especially when we are the choreographers and we have a staff of 7, not 700, 7, but still, and it's very similar. Oh, did you hear that, Louise? It's very similar. And, but they're communicating our message. They're communicating about our work, and it feels extremely personal. And so how do we keep tabs on every day when the words need to change, or the message, or the grant that's written for this, and all of a sudden you look at it the next day and you say, that's not where my head is now at all. And so, but in thinking about this, that communication piece is so important, because it's over time when you communicate with your funders or your audience or presenters, and you keep up that relationship and you build trust like we were talking about, is when you develop stakeholders in the work. And once you do that, and then you become free to come back and create the work again, because you have people that trust you. But you need to constantly be aware of who is your audience for this granting panel and this granting panel and this granting panel, or this presenter is different from this presenter and what are their missions. But it's that constant communication and articulation of the work that needs to happen so people understand your relevance in our changing ecology.
Okay. That gets us going. We're going to open it up here. I just want to say that we have very short period of time today. It's a really brief session, and we'd like to keep the conversation moving and fluid and fast-paced and lively and significant and all of these things. I'm going to ask you to keep your remarks succinct, save your longer anecdotes and stories for conversations to be pursued later. Okay, so, and we have some microphones on the side, we're looking actually for not only the things that keep you centered, but the things that are pulling you off, and maybe any help that you can give to others who are in the same situation. If you have any responses. And those of you who maybe started, yeah. Okay. Could you say who you are too?
Hi, I'm Sally Roos. I'm co-founder of James Will Ballet and now head of Sally Roos Unlimited. And I'm curious about, well, I'm really grateful for the benefits and support of a 501c3 and the tax exemption status and all of the benefits and support of that. But at the same time, it's becoming an onus, and it's a gravity pull. The assessment, the linear practicalities, the proving, and the all of that, do you know what I mean? And I'm curious about a conversation about for-profit and hybrid organizations, for example, Palablis and Momix and several others, I'm sure.
So the idea of giving up your 501c3 status and moving into a different status? A hybrid status.
And I'm just wondering about a conversation of that. And because we had the opening plenary about corporate ideas,
right.
Just that sort of thing.
Okay. Does anybody have anything that they might be able to help with here? In terms of this notion, I know a lot of you here are dealing with that onus of 501c3. Okay.
That has been a conversation a lot in Los Angeles, I would probably say for decades. I was just mentioning earlier that there's a reason that sometimes we're still referred to as the Wild West. And just figuring out your own way through it, I think that there's huge validity in that. I think, part of the challenge is the funding construct is not quite ready to make that shift and that move, but I've been hearing more and more artists wanting to question this notion of a 501c3. So I would just suggest to start that research and start that process, because I actually believe in a lot of ways that is the direction that so many are going. A lot of people will use the word collaboration. I think it flows. It's really nice to say. It's not always so easy to do, but if you are of collaborative mindset, I think that that's a good way to research as well.
Okay. Yes, right here.
Continuing with that discussion, 501c3 was a mechanism through which dance companies could quickly transform themselves to get on a national touring program. That program is now long dead, and if you're not getting grants or enough donations to make it worth it, you could always use another model. The only thing is that the kind of dance as we know it is not, it's difficult to make a business model out of it because it's not popular.
Mm-hmm. I was at a funding panel earlier, and there was a push among the panelists urging fiscal sponsorship and not going the 501c3 route to make more use of that. Mm-hmm.
Hi, my name is Christopher Morgan, and I'm artistic director of a small dance company in the Metro DC area. And in 3 years, I've built a limited liability corporation that has a fiscal sponsor. In 3 years, I've made a $200,000 annual budget out of that. And we are able to get certain grants that process through our fiscal sponsor, which takes a generous and willing partner, which is a lot of relationship building and not easy to do. But I don't have to have the burden of the board, which isn't always a burden, but for a small organization and a small staff would be a lot of time in maintaining that board, reporting to them, all of the transparency things that I believe are important but difficult for a small organization to have. And all of our earned revenue can go directly to the LLC. So it cuts out the middleman in a lot of ways. And I think for a small upstart, it's a really lean way to go about just doing the art and actually not wasting the money as much. Many funders want to do on overhead, and it's a necessary thing. The overhead is very necessary, but when you're small, it's hard to part that money to an administrator when I'd really rather give it to my beautiful dancer who's working her buns off. So for me, that's been a successful model, and I'd be happy to tell you about some specifics. It was able to happen quickly and pretty affordably.
Great, thank you so much. Thank you so much. Do we have maybe another issue for people?
Well, this is just bouncing off that. I just wanted
Can you say who you are?
Oh, sorry. My name is Jason Seng, and I work for Fractured Atlas. So I may be a biased, voice in the room for fiscal sponsorship. But I just also want, but speaking outside of my role with my company, I just also want to call into the issue about the structure of institutionalization around 501c3 statuses is, an inherently one that is systemically racist, and it creates barriers for people of color, for poor folks. And I just want to call that into the room.
Okay, great. Do we have another issue?
Can you pass this? Sorry, can you pass this?
Recently, my name is Michelle Steinwald. I live here and I work in some national circles and get invited to national panels. And more finding with the role I play in the local dance community that I have to recuse myself from being a participant when local artists are being evaluated because of a perceived conflict of interest. And it has me questioning my role because I'm very hands-on with artists locally and am brought into these conversations for geographic diversity and unable to be the expert that I should be on that panel. And I really think that it's time to redefine what is conflict of interest and a perceived conflict of interest, because it's getting in the way of me doing my job.
Okay. Lots of, anybody have anything to answer to that idea of conflict of interest, perceived conflict of interest?
I'd like to say something.
Okay.
I absolutely hear you, Michelle, and I find myself in similar positions. I've been in Chicago now about 12 years. In addition to my work with Hubbard Street, I sit on some programming committees, and more am part of artist evaluations and application review and all of that sort of thing. And I agree that conflict of interest is much more in the approach than what a relationship is on paper, or the fact that you have ever been to someone's home or worked with them on a project 5 years prior. I think that something that is sharing information among the dance community is already difficult. And I think that on the artistic sides of organizations especially, that requires so much time in the studio. And I don't know anyone who's doing artistic work right now who's not completely in the center of a tug of war on a daily basis between their studio or the theater and their desk, and not feeling like they have enough time to be in both places and to really honor both their correspondence and the work that needs to be done physically in space. And so to the extent that anyone, I think, is able to speak to an artist's work, is familiar with it, has maybe even collaborated with them in the past or been a member of an ensemble that a couple years later, invite those people in, take it with a grain of salt, disclaim when you need to disclaim, be transparent about what your relationships with people are. But I would like to wholeheartedly say that, just sort of being quick to operate under standard conflict of interest concerns often comes at the expense of information being able to move freely through a community where it's already difficult for that to happen.
Yeah. Is this on the same issue?
Conflict of interest?
Yes.
Just a thought is that you're there because, oh, sorry, I'm Mimi Beck from Toronto, Canada. You're there in that position because you're interested. So I think we need to find ways to manage these conflicts of interest, and possibly setting out at the beginning of a panel to define what is the conflict of interest. Sometimes it's, are you standing to benefit financially directly from a decision on a certain issue? And otherwise, you're the expert and you should be heard.
Yeah, I think the issue becomes perceived conflict. Yeah. Do we have another concern? Yes, right in the middle here. Can you stand up? Thank you. Collaboration.
Dance too? No. So my name's Kate Hutter. I'm from LA Contemporary Dance. And something that you find in LA is kind of the pull of the commercial and what it is to actually be popular in dance. There's a lot of people making a lot of money dancing and making dance, and they often are not included in these conversations, whether they work on dance conventions or dance competitions, or so you think you can dance. So I think I love concert dance and performing live. So that's my pull, my center. But I think I enjoy the challenge of what is considered popular dance, and the fact that we do actually live in a world that really is starting to love dance and pay for it, but just not maybe in the ways we've come to make it and the models we do follow. So I think I don't have an answer to it, but I think surround yourself even with the things that you've put off or kind of denoted as not real dance, and embrace it and see what commercially might be working. And I'm not saying replicate it, but I think put it in the conversation because it is extremely relevant. There is popular dance.
Okay. Maybe we could hear from some people about what you think your centers are. What are your core values that anchor you and keep you doing this really hard thing? Yeah, right here.
Hi, Laura Colby with LC Management in Brooklyn. For me, what centers me is being with the work. So that means getting out of my office and getting into the rehearsal studio with my artists and being with them in the process of creation, and then the delicious moment of being able to be in the theater.
We also heard about time pulls in the Post-it notes that were submitted. There was a lot about time. How many people feel like they don't have time to actually be in touch with the work that's going on? That is almost everybody in this room. That's really amazing. Renee wants to add 5 hours to the day. Might seem something of a solution. I'm wondering if anybody has any suggestions about how. Laura suggests that that just has to be at the top of your priority list. What are some real things that you do to make that happen on a more regular basis? Anybody?
We have a great organization I'm Robert Harmon, a dancer in town. We have a great organization called Springboard for the Arts. They do physical sponsorship as well as some health insurance related interactivity. Great resource. They also go out into the community and work with artists on this issue, time management. They do this one thing where you do a mapping. It can be a project, it can be a birthday, it can be something, and you map the timing in realistic chunks, whatever the sizes look like, a week, an hour a day. And then you go down and you figure out exactly what it is you need to do, and you can break it down to even more discrete steps. But that's one thing that I've learned, and I haven't used it very well.
Okay, interesting that we, yeah, that's the thing to make ourselves do that. And it's interesting because we've talked a lot about mapping at this conference, but not in that way. And the idea of mapping a project, really interesting idea. There was somebody up here, yeah.
Hi, Liz Silverstein, Siegel Artist Management, and I've been at this quite a while. As evidenced by my new hair. I got rid of the shoe polish. But I have found after these many years that the only thing that keeps me able to keep going is to step away. We've had retreats in my business for 25 years, away from all of our offices and together. And since then, my business partner has instituted an agents and managers retreat to which presenters or anyone in the field is welcome.
Mm-hmm.
And it really is a retreat and a think tank. And to a person, we come back feeling like we have new energy, new ideas, and more time to make them happen. And I encourage you that if you are in, as almost everybody is, the money is not the currency, time is the currency.
Right.
Get away from your job.
Okay, so is there a retreat structure that you can think of that also has to do with retreating to be with the art? Is there some kind of model for that? Yes, we have a few over here. Oh, Laura, you have the mic.
Laura, again, I was just going to volunteer that the practice, in the same way that I separate myself from my screen a minimum of once an hour now, I'm trying to force myself to do that for my eyes and my sanity. It's also the practice of getting out of my office at least once a month.
Mm-hmm.
So to make that, put that on my to-do list.
So on a map, yes, and up here. Okay.
Hi, Matthew Keefe. I'm the artistic director of Rockford Dance Company. Sorry. One of the things that we have been doing recently in my organization, just to, again, grab those little bits of time and increase, and just really focusing in on trying to increase our team productivity and how we communicate with each other, and using project management things to get the email down so that we're not constantly obsessing with that, and directing our focuses towards the things that are really relevant to the things that we're doing, and get some of the chatter down, actually reducing the amount of meetings and being able to take things offline. Really wonky stuff, but it does take the stress down a lot. We use a product called Asana, which is free for teams under 15, and it's a project management thing that it reduces the email, and we attach documents to tasks that are things like Google Docs, so it's not a dead copy, it's actually a living thing. Not having to continually update that stuff, that it's happening with a little bit more automation helps a lot, but it's getting people used to working in a new format. So following some of the technological stuff that we've been talking about is really exciting, and I think that it streamlines things a little bit to get a little bit more ahead of the curve.
Can you say the name of that again, Matthew, for people?
Asana, ASANA.
ASANA. Okay, great.
It's an online tool. It's got great tutorials. There's another one called Basecamp that works really well as well.
Great.
So,
yes.
can I? This is me, Aparna, here, Suzanne. I'm on stage.
Oh, sorry.
Well, first, it's funny hearing you talk. I want to get rid of reply all, actually, because. But I want to go back to something that Laura said initially. I talked about creating the work and having time to create the work, but if you're working with an artist, seeing the work, experiencing the work is the #1 priority. I don't think there is even a question, I know we're all busy, of finding the time to go see the work, because if you don't know the work, you can't talk about the work. So what else are you writing emails about? It's really important. I think it's really important that the people you're working with, that they understand what it is that they're talking about. So I just want to reinforce that.
Okay, so I'm going to add something else. Peter Bull had to leave the conference early, but he had submitted an idea for this panel, which is another aesthetic issue, which I know everybody's dealing with here in one way or another. For him, it's about his audiences wanting full-length ballets. And he feels committed to, and his heart is in contemporary dance. And how does he keep an audience with him who is pulling him off his center of gravity, which is the commitment to contemporary dance, without making them feel like they're not getting what they want, or they're being forced to deal with something unfamiliar. And I'm wondering if anybody has anything to say about that. Yeah.
Hi, Penelope Free, independent choreographer here in town. I just want to say
that I think that issue exists in the modern world. I think, or in the contemporary dance world, I think that long form works are rewarded. And in fact, I've been told by a funding institution here that I had to propose a long form work and I can't work in short form, and that's not legitimized as something fundable. So someone who I kind of straddle the fence between ballet and modern dance, I find that really frustrating. So I think it's an issue. Yeah, I think it affects all of us. So I have no answer, but I just wanted to piggyback on the complaint.
Is there anybody who has dealt with this and come up with any kind of solution? Yes, right here.
I think I'm Rani Ramaswamy. I'm artistic director of Ragamala Dance. I think we have dealt with this for the last 35 years that I've been doing work. If you do a full-length work, then you have to do short works. If you do classical work, you have to do Bollywood. If you do Bollywood, then you have to, if you don't do Bollywood, you have to explain your gestures and make sure everybody understands everything. I think there is always going to be this not being satisfied with 100% by everybody, but I think the only solution is if you know you want to do, just keep doing what you want to do. And you cannot just make work for somebody else. You have to make work for yourself and make sure that you draw the audience and the presenters and educate them to say, why are you doing your work and why you don't want to do something else.
Okay, okay. Renee, you had something you wanted to say?
I'm not sure if I have, the holy grail or the answer necessarily, but we have a similar challenge that Peter is trying to manage or contend with. I think you're exactly right. I think it's the part, it's the education piece, but not letting them know that what you're doing is educating them. You are hopefully inspiring them, starting that transformation where they start to have their own ownership, and where it feels like, and what we've been able to do is start from our subscriber base and our donor base, and trying to bring in ways where they connect with the abstract. Because what I find is it's not necessarily full length, the full evening of work, but it's the narrative that they want to attach to. They are not as comfortable with the abstract and making up their own mind. So that is the piece that we have to turn over for them. And I feel like it's ongoing. I think that's something that we all talk about as well. So it's just part of an ongoing process.
Okay, somebody has a mic here?
Yeah, Deidre Huckabee from Lucky Plush Productions in Chicago. I have to say that at Lucky Plush we love our audiences, and they're a huge part, participatory part of our work, but we are making dance, which is an art, not exactly a product. And for us, it's important. I'm just so happy we got that perspective. The kind of audience we want to see our work is the audience that loves our work, So we've had a lot of success just reaching out to them, making friends with them. I'm glad we got that perspective too at the corporate marketing session over the weekends. We treat them like friends and not like potential customers.
Okay. I'd like to go to our lightning round now. Just really do very quickly what your center is, what your issue is. Anybody? What's pulling you off? What's your center? What's pulling you off?
Oh, can I talk about what's keeping me on?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay. Catherine Tully. I write a blog called For Dancers. I think for me, it was permission to not bring it all to the table. I think we all really feel like we have to do everything. We have to be good at everything in our organization. And I think it's important to know that there's things that you can't do well. And for me, I actually took a test in a book that they use in business called the Strengths Finder, and it gives you like your top 5 skills. And it kind of gives you a perspective of yourself so you can know what you don't bring to the table, so that then you can take that piece which you were talking about, which is collaboration, and really utilize that to its fullest.
Okay.
I think
Can you
that's
say what that is again?
Sure. It's called Strengths Finder. It was 1.0 when I used it, but I don't know what it is now.
Okay.
I'm sorry? Yeah, yeah.
Okay, great. Okay, somebody else. Center, pull. Really?
Hi, this is Walter Jaffe with Whitebird. I think there's many things that pull upon me. We have such a small presenting organization, but I think the meaning of what is dance today. Our mission is to bring the best contemporary dance to Portland, Oregon. As Paul indicated, he was in Australia. We're seeing work now that people are saying, is that dance? Mm-hmm. And really what we're doing is redefining what dance is for our audiences. So the idea of just bringing contemporary dance, what does that mean today? We're actually bringing new forms, new circus, movement-based circus this coming season. Actually, we're getting more and more into circus. There's new magic. Certainly the lines are blurring between the two.
So you're broadening your center.
Yes,
yeah.
I think that's a challenge, and that's something that we're having to deal with as dance presenters.
Okay. Yeah, somebody here. Yes.
Hi, my name is Danielle Creek. I work at Dance USA Philadelphia. My center is being a dancer and an artist. My pull is that I have a huge student loan debt. So it's a constant battle of trying to find work that allows you, that allows you to survive as well as do your art. And so all I have to say is consider when you have your free internships and your free volunteer jobs that a lot of these young professionals coming into the field are struggling. So just consider that in your budgetary.
Okay. Somebody else want to tell us their center? Yes, sir. Up here.
I think my name is Thaddeus Davis of Whiteman Davis Dance from Columbia, South Carolina, and newly Chicago. The center is for me is to be with the work, to be with the artist, to be a part of it as a dancer, choreographer, teacher, all of those things that I am. The pull is to be an American artist and to see the market move towards European artists and bringing them to America to be presented and not feel a connection, to be able to have the work that I'm doing from my American, Southern African American experience be seen.
Somebody else want to tell us what their center is? Yes, right here.
Deborah Chinzather, local choreographer. I just wanted to share with you, my poll is I have too much to do. My center is twice a week. I go in my studio for an hour and I call it the process of distraction. So it's kind of like class, like dance class to me. So I start with cardio, and because cardio is so boring, I get distracted. And so I make sure that I have a pen around and a paper, and I write, and then, here comes a choreographic idea. Then I follow that for a little while. Now get bored again, get back on my mini tramp, run around. I'm bored, here comes the phrase. So I call it the process of distraction, and I think it really helps center me by allowing myself to become distracted, because I'm always trying to focus myself. So I allow myself to get hyper distracted.
Okay. Somebody else.
Laura again. My center is the work, and the pull is living and working at the mercy of the economy, conflicts, and the cycle of booking, the process of booking can be inherently, utterly impossible.
Who has something that they've solved recently?
I've got a solution.
Okay, great.
Starting shortly after I came to Hubbard Street, we moved away from producing ready-made program books for our main stage engagements in Chicago, our subscription series. We decided for a number of reasons to take on the burden of fully producing, designing, writing, and printing, and selling advertising in our own books, which started at, I think the first one was around 30 pages, and we're up to about 80 now. They're profitable. We make money from them selling the advertising space. They're gorgeously laid out. I go from having to cram all of the contextual information about a mixed bill of 4 works by completely different choreographers into 4 pages, to having 30 pages of editorial and advertorial to fill with whatever I want. So that's Q's and A's with choreographers. will have multiple interviews in the program book, more extensive program notes, more complete credits for the work. So all of the music information, all of the technical and creative credits, all of the staff listings, all of the donor recognition. We just have so much more space. And I just think that it just gives, we make them available online as soon as they go to print. We also produce them as in an issue platform for browsing online, which is also really easily accessible on a mobile device. We did that for a simulcast performance a couple weeks ago. So people were able to, we didn't have 3,000 programs to hand out to people in the park, but we threw the URL, go to bit.ly/Hubbard program, and the entire program notes for the entire performance were available on, people were looking at it on their phones. So people can do, you're making available context about the work, so that when people sit down and the curtain goes up, they have so much information, they're so much more ready to receive what you're doing.
That sounds expensive, Zach. You say you're making money at it, though.
Yeah, the trick is to track the ad sales ahead of the production costs, so you have that, you have that cash when it's time to take it to the printer.
And who's doing it? Who's actually doing the work? You're doing the work, and that's part of it's part of your operating budget.
Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely. It comes. It's handled by the marketing department. My colleague Stacy Rector, our director of marketing, and myself, we put it together with our designer.
I think I saw Liz Silverstein again. I was getting to the point where the demands on my life were overwhelming, and the most helpful thing I did was to figure out what could I eliminate, what job that is tearing me apart could I drop. So I'm no longer the president of my condo association. Thank you very much.
Suzanne, did you have something you want to say? Okay. Ivan? Okay. And what have you learned recently, Ivan?
I went to a session last week about social media and stuff that I'm not part of. And I thought, I was afraid that I was being told we had to change the work to fit in those new formats. I finally realized...
Can you repeat what the session was again that you went to?
It wasn't here.
Okay.
But it could have been. It was about improving your marketing by incorporating new kinds of social media. I have been afraid for years that the real message was you've got to change the work into something that fits into those formats. What I finally realized is they were saying, don't change the product, change the branding. And these new forms are simply other prisms to light the work and have it reach different people in different ways. And that's legitimate and nothing we need fear.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yes, in the back. Can you raise your hand? You had your hand up in the back? No? Okay. Right. Okay, Jowle.
I think what I learned is we took a 2.5-year break from touring. We went on a hiatus. It was a near-death experience, but what I learned is that we all sometimes have to just stop because the treadmill, just doing to keep doing because we've been doing it, takes us away from our core.
Mm-hmm.
We're back.
You're back. These are great. Somebody else want to share what you've learned recently? Yes, right here. Can we get a mic here? Thank you.
Hi, my name is Lisa First, and I'm the Executive Director of Link Vostok East-West International Dance Exchange. And we've been going on for about a little over 20 years. And within the last year and a half, we lost our operating support, funding for European dancers from the Rudolf Nureyev Foundation, and our main New York funder. So it's required me to be very adaptable and very flexible very quickly.
Mm-hmm.
So my wish has been to, in a sense, return to the past, but approach it in a brand new way. So I started out more project-oriented with our nonprofit, and I'm really enjoying actually reinventing what we used to do and seeing if we can find new directions through that. But it was a gravity pull.
Okay. 3 things. What are we doing right? What are we doing right? Surely we're doing something right in this field. Making art. Okay, one. Another one. Touching people in both senses of that word. Yeah, all senses of that word. Jawale. Okay, somebody get a microphone, and I'm going to make her say that again, because that's really important. This is Jawale Willajozar.
Our work is about connection. Dance is about, live performance is about connection. Classes are about connection. And that is what we're doing right. And we live in a virtual world. People want connection. And our world does that. And we're doing that right.
Okay, and that's our center, right? That's what we have to keep in mind. In preparing for this panel, I looked up the technical definition of gravity. And I found that gravity is a force pulling together all matter. The more matter, the more gravity. Mass is how we measure the amount of matter in something. The more massive something is, the more gravitational pull exerts. And as we walk the surface of the Earth, it pulls on us and we pull back. But since the Earth is so much more massive than we are, the pull from us is not strong enough to move the Earth, while the pull from the Earth can make us fall flat on our faces. Okay, so it seems to me that there's a lesson in this. We have to be the Earth. We have to have the mass. Alone, we're going to fall flat on our faces. But if we all come together, our center of gravity becomes larger, we have more pull, bringing the people with whom we work, all of us here in the room, but also funders and government and audiences and boards, to a new point of view, a new aesthetic, out of their own comfort zone. We're all in this together. This is just the start, as Paul said, of a longer conversation that we're all going to be having together through Dance USA. And I'd like to urge you to keep the conversations going, but also, if you could, we'd love to hear from you about what forms that could take, that conversation could take. The technology that we hate is also the technology we love, so we can figure out how to do it from that. So let's please keep this conversation going, find it in ways to do that. I'd like to thank the panel today, and I'd also like to thank everybody here. We are the Earth. Thank you.
Amy Fitterer.
Hello. Let's just do one more round of applause for the amazing Suzanne Carbonneau. And I'm going to make our wonderful panelists just sit there for a moment while Cece and I say some farewell remarks. We have Cece Connor.
Well, I hope you all have had a great conference. I know I've heard many, many rich and deep discussions going on. And it's I hope for everybody, it has been for me a wonderful conference. I want to say thank you to Aparna and George and Sarah and everybody on the host committee here in Minneapolis and everybody in Minneapolis who made us feel so welcome. And thank you for letting us share these wonderful two facilities you have here and at Northup. My gosh, when a town and a state puts the money in, look at what can happen for dance. It's really exciting. And a year from now, we're going to be in Miami, so y'all come on down to the south.
That's right. So thank you all so much. It has been absolutely a wonderful time to be here. We've learned a lot. We've talked a lot. I can't wait to keep growing with all of you. Stay connected to us because we're here because of you and for you and by you. So I'll see you in Miami and a safe trip home. Thank you.